for jobs?
Not for war.
Money for health care?
Not for war.
Money for peace?
Not for war.
Money for schools?
Not for war.
Money for jobs?
Not for war.
Money for health care?
Not for war.
Money for peace?
Not for war.
Money for schools?
Not for war.
Money for jobs?
Not for war.
Money for health care?
Not for war.
Money for peace?
Not for war.
Money for housing.
Not for war.
Money for housing.
Not for war!
Money for schools.
Not for war.
Money for health care.
Not for war.
Money for our community.
Not for war.
Money for the infrastructures of our city.
Not for war.
Money for science? Money for science? Money for science! Money for science! Money for
subway. Money for clean energy. Yeah, not clean. Renewable.
Call it out!
Pipeline. Money for locusts.
Not for war!
Correct.
Nuclear power too.
No money for J-RATC. We're spending $1.5 million of city taxpayer money for this military program in the schools of New York. Let us say no. Use that money for computers, for science, for art.
Yes! Yes, we can!
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank all of you. You know, when I see the faces, I like to be as a person that we can say that we dedicate the whole life fighting for social justice.
That's right.
Yes, that's all. Like, you know, when I was arrested, like one of the times that I was arrested, in the peaceful disobedience in front of the UN, with the effort to take the Navy out of Vietnam. There was, you know, a lady there. I don't think that she's here, but she was like in her 90s. And she was, you know, part of the group that we were holding the peaceful disobedience. So, and for me, those are the role models. Because I know that many of you have dedicated the whole life. It's not only like, here we are fighting for social justice, but many of you been organizing since the 1960s. Yes. You know, like you are those who took this nation to where it was before and be able to see some changes. However, today, still we live in a segregated society. Yes. Because the quality of the services, the opportunity of this nation is based on the zip code where a child is born and raised. And this is a conversation that we need to have as a movement. Because like, you know, like the discussion about social class is more than any ethnic group or socio-economic group. Yeah. It's about opportunity. It's about why this nation is still take most of the resources, yes, used for the military. Why we are trying to, you know, go outside and talk about being a role model. And here in the city of New York, 70% of the students, they live in shelters. Why we talk about unemployment going down the city, but unemployment where? Because if we look at unemployment in the South Bronx, if we look at unemployment uptown Manhattan, it's not the same down 160th Street. If you talk about the Amazon trying to come here and the city say, we will give you $3 billion. But we have 80% of the jobs in New York City created by the local small business, by the mom and pop store, and there's not any incentive at all. So for me, as someone, again, that when I came here in 1983, you know, in my luggage, I did not only come few clothing, but I came with ideas, with the organizing ideas of organizing. So since 83, that's what I've been doing. And in many of those fights, we've been together. When the United States talk about invading Iraq, invading any place, we've been together. I remember in 1991, I was telling my niece over here, I was arrested inside the corner when the George Bush father invaded Iraq. And I remember being there, like, you know, and protesting, taking the street. I never forget at the time of Ronnie King rebel in California, happening at the same time when Rigoberta Menchú also came to New York City. Because we worked with the government too in those days. It was when we took the highway. So we've been there. We've been in the same journey together. So for many people, they would never understand what is that we're pushing for. What is this resolution all about? Why does there still so many great leaders in this city of New York, in the whole nation? That question of why we invest trillions and trillions of dollars in the military sector. And we are sitting, living in the same third world nation level. Like we don't want to talk about it. It's like here they're talking about don't go to Santo Domingo because there's crime. But they don't say don't go to Chicago because there's crime. Here we have the UNICEF and the United Nations say we need to bring those programs to the third world country. Well, the only reason why they don't say that we should bring the same program to the South Bronx and the working class is because then we're going to be showing the world that here in this nation, where we are so powerful, we are still have those level of poverty.
That's right.
So for me, this movement is about that. It's not only about here we are calling for the real discussion. If the mayor of the city of New York met with the other mayors throughout the nation and they passed a resolution questioning and opening the conversation about why we need to have this discussion at the local levels on pushing nationwide for the United States, for the Pentagon to reduce the cost of more than $3 trillion, which take like 1/3 of the budget, is go to the military. It's not for the peace effort. It's about let's try to invade Venezuela. You know, like the whole thing is about like, guys, is that those people think that we are so stupid? Like they don't think that we know that, you know, that there's gonna be millions and millions of people in the streets when the United States made the move to invade Venezuela.
Yeah.
And they will be using Colombia, and they will be using Brazil, and they will be using one of those units that they have. That everyone knows, there's a unit that they have that they get into action. And they portray the CNN and the Fox News as it was the enemy who made it. And this is about creating the conditions so that people justify why we need to be invaded. So in here we're talking about the Afghanistan and 80% of the opium was produced there. It still is produced today. Because here we have the nation that consumes more drugs in the whole world.
That's right.
And we live in the open market society. Here we have a nation that has the largest numbers of people in the prison system because it's a business.
Yes.
Because after the 13th Amendment, that's the only reason that you can use to make people to do things against the will. So this conversation is about that. This oil, there's a lot of oil in Venezuela. And water. You know, the Plan Colombia was about water. We are controlling the Ecuador and they're controlling Colombia. Because the water is more expensive than oil. And more than 70% of the oxygen is produced in the Amazon.
That's right, brother. That's it.
So we need to continue. And sometimes, you know, we go against what the media make of people to believe.
That's right.
But the most important things in life is that you know that you've been there from the beginning to the end.
That's right.
And knowing that you are, you know, one of those, like the Matrix, it's like the movies. Yes, you are the one, but this is a collective one. So for me, I end with this. I'm happy and proud to be invited to work on this resolution. This is not my resolution. This is the people resolution.
Yes.
I speak it loud and clear.
Yeah.
We speak it loud and clear. You know, sometimes we don't have to agree on everything. Which is one thing that I will say, you know, in this couple of days, like, where Councilmember stand, this Councilmember, you know, getting the support or working with this Councilmember. Well, here in this body, when I put a resolution, when they passed the anti-immigrant resolution in Arizona, and I put a resolution calling for New York City to stop investing in any company that they were investing in Arizona.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was told by some of my good colleagues here I see the merits of that resolution, but I cannot sign it because I represent a district, but we have many business sector here. So here we are, this is how we do business in this body. And for me, one thing that I gotta say is that I'm the immigrants born and raised in another country that get the job done to wash dishes at Old Henry Restaurant, West 4th and 6th Avenue. Now there's a Capital Bank. But as many of you and your ancestors that came from Europe, that came from Africa, that came from Latin America, we not only came here to provide cheap labor, we also came with a lot of organizing skills. And that's what we're doing today. So here we hope that the city of New York, as we are moving this conversation and discussion on budget, maintain in the equation the effort to call for the Pentagon and for the United States to reduce investing trillions of dollars in a stupid war. There are no words for democracy. Many of them is war for oil. It's more for tech company. Because that's when they test one of those equipment that then later on they use in the city, in the civilian. So for me, again, I'm happy to be here. I will continue working only on this resolution. But let's get ready, because there's a real plan of this country to invade Venezuela. And as we know that the Venezuelans, they should decide the future, we also need to know we also need to know that every country should decide their own future. All the sector in Venezuela, they should sit down at the table. But everything that's been happening these days is not about Venezuela. It's about oil. It's about Trump. It's about the elite of this country. That they are not yet Democrat or Republican. They look about the resources. It's about controlling of the nation. So it's about profit. So for me, again, as someone very proud to see how you have dedicated the whole life and hoping that I will live under your shadow to continue that legacy. It is an honor for me to be here working in this important resolution that they will not make us a law, but this is opening a conversation about why and how we live in a city of New York so segregated. There's no any melting pot in the city. Let's call it. Every group is living in their own space. Like this, that's what we are. The school districts in the city are segregated. The best schools are only in particular areas. And we talk about sharing the seat, that's when the privileged are there. And people, it can be, doesn't matter if you're the more progressive, but that conversation must happen. So I hope again that before the mayor and the council do the handshake, you continue playing the role. Because there's people speaking out and clear that the priority of this budget should be for working class, should be to create good paid jobs, should be to provide the best quality education. Coding and technology should not be only for white boys, should be for female, and should be for black and Latino. Just do the math and look where do we are coding and technology program. They are not in the underserved community. They are not including female on the same level. So with that, I would like to pass, to Sam and be able to Jim and be able to take it from there with all the speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So our first speaker is going to be Susan Stahl, President of Veterans for Peace. Susan, where are you?
Susan, Veterans for Peace.
Okay, Susan's coming down from the top. The speakers who will be with us in a few moments. Try to be closer to the podium if you can, so that we can do this efficiently. Susan, where are you?
Susan's coming up.
Ex-Navy nurse and president of Veterans for Peace, Chapter 34, Susan Stahl.
Good morning, everybody.
Susan.
Oh, yes, I know, but I was following the steps. So it has been, for some of us, over 50 years that we have been working on peace and social justice issues. I know, but I have to turn around, right? I just said, for some of us, it's been 40, 50, 60 years that we have been working on peace and social justice issues. And my main comment today was to talk about veterans for peace, who are people who have been to war and said, enough. We need to turn our efforts into peace issues, to spend our resources for domestic issues, to provide health care and housing and education for everybody. It is time to move the money. Time to move the money. Right? To move the money for domestic issues, to take care of our children, to take care of people in need, to make sure that we continue to take to the streets and make sure that our public officials, and thank you for being here today, to support, move the money from war, move the money from destruction, move the money from death to social issues. So for all of us, it's to move the money. Move the money. Thank you.
Next up is Molly Nolan, representing Brooklyn for Peace.
For over 3 decades, Brooklyn for Peace has been protesting against American wars and military interventions abroad, against the dangerous militarization of our society at home, and against the outrageous military budget. $686 billion last round, that's over 50% of discretionary federal spending, and that doesn't count the cost of wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Those are all funded with supplementary appropriations. The U.S. spends over 1/3 of the world's military spending. It spends more money than the next 7 or 8 countries combined on its military. It doesn't make us safer, but more importantly, we can't afford it. If we want to have the kind of programs we need, better schools, affordable, accessible health care, decent, affordable housing, a functioning subway system, we have to move the money. If we want to deal with global warming and implement the Green New Deal, we need to move the money from the military. We need to do it in order to fund the Green New Deal. We also need to do it because the military is one of the largest emitters of CO2 in the world. Brooklyn for Peace has been on the streets over the last several years at street fairs, polling people who are out for street fairs about how they want their federal tax dollars spent. Overwhelmingly, they want it spent on social programs and jobs, the environment, and education. They don't want it spent on war. They have spoken out. It's time for the City Council to speak out, to support this resolution, and to hold public hearings on this important issue. We won't be able to build the kind of New York City we want and need unless we move the money now.
Michael Klein, U.S. Labor Against the War, New York City chapter. And the emeritus professor of economics at SUNY, Tony Brooklyn.
And a constituent of this fine gentleman right here for 21 years up in Washington Heights. So, I'm from U.S. Labor Against the War. We represent about a dozen different unions and labor federations here in New York City and around the country, over 160 labor federations. And we stand opposed to these wars and to move the money. We all know here, everybody knows, that we need more services and we need more money in New York City. We work here, we live here, we try to provide services for our people here, so we know what's involved. I want to just put in some numbers here to give people an idea of what's involved with this military budget. President Trump has proposed a budget, and Congress is going along with it, that takes 59% of all the discretionary money and puts it into the military. Almost 60%. By comparison, 5% goes for housing, 5% goes for education, 3% goes for transportation, 59% goes for the military. So what is that? That is an outrage. That is an insult to the people of New York City. That is an insult to the people of the world. We spend, as we just heard, more money in our military budget than the next 7 countries combined. 5 of those are our own allies. So what are we talking about here? It is just an outrage what this country is doing in our name, and we are here to put a stop to it. Now, the National Priorities Project has done a calculation for us about what this all means for New York City. So let me just give you a clue. If we would take, not the whole military budget, let's just cut it by 10%. If we cut the military budget by 10%, that's still more than half of the discretionary budget goes to the military. So we aren't crippling our national defense. Let's just take 10%. Here's what we would get in New York City. If we would take the money that New York City pays in income tax to the federal government, and that part of it goes to the military budget, and take 10% of that and bring it back, it would be about $2.5 billion a year. Now what could you do with that money? Well, you could get over 5,000 school teachers. And on top of that, you could get almost 7,000 clean energy jobs. And on top of that, you could get over 9,000 infrastructure jobs. And on top of that, you could get almost 50,000 Head Start slots for our kids. And on top of that, you could get another 40,000 military vets getting VA benefits. All of that, and you still have money left over from what we would give in just 10% of what we send up there. I mean, that's serious, man. This is an outrage to the people of the city of New York. Now, I want to talk about one other aspect of the military budget, and that's what's called the 1033 program. You may not be familiar with it. This is a program that gets the Defense Department to send military equipment to our cities. And there's fairs all over this country where police departments can go and pick up military hardware, and the federal government will pay for it. New York City has gotten 4 armored trucks valued at $65,000 each, 2 former artillery vehicles known as mortar carriers valued at more than $200,000 each, and the New York NYPD. What the hell do they need mortar carriers? But we got them here in New York just in case we're being attacked. Is that security? I don't think that's security. If the militarized police are in our communities, that is not security for those communities. And every African American in this city knows that. Every Hispanic person in this city knows that. Every white person in this city knows it or should know it. We cannot have the militarization of our police. We cannot have the militarization of our borders, and we cannot have the militarization of our foreign policy. So those things that we buy with all that military hardware, that is not security. They want to tell us, oh, the military is making us secure. Security is having a job. Security is having a house that you can live in. Security is having a school where you can put your kids and have them learn something. That's security. That's why we say books, not bombs. That's why we say healthcare, not warfare. Subways, not submarines. Housing, not Humvees. Or housing, not barracks. You don't want to give up the alliteration. So we're very grateful from U.S. Labor Against the War, from the labor movement in New York City, to Councilman Rodriguez and to allies in the city council to take up this question and hold hearings so that the whole city can learn about these things, so that we can have an airing of these facts and get our delegation in Congress, our delegation in the Senate, to understand that here in New York City, we want to move the money. And we want the city council to step up and make that same statement after hearing evidence to this effect. So in that way, I'm happy to represent U.S. Labor Against the War, the New York City chapter, and be with all of you here, our allies, and again to thank Councilmember Rodriguez for his leadership in this. And we are pledging here to work together with everybody as the work continues. And it will.
Move the money. 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 office, Jim Anderson, President of New York State Peace Action.
Say hello to this family. I am so pleased to be here. I started off this week in Buffalo, going to Geneseo County to talk to our student peace chapter, who are doing the same thing that all of you are doing, organizing to not only move the money, but to stop war. I left there and was in Albany yesterday, where you know they were rallying and lobbying for fair elections and for criminal justice reform. I am super pleased to be here today with you and with a strong, bold councilman who is speaking truth, and not only speaking it, but moving it through a resolution that I hope will begin to cause a tidal wave across the state and our city. We need elected officials who represent not only the interests of their community, but for humanity. That's right. Councilman Rodriguez, thank you. Let me tell you, I'm also bringing you a message of solidarity. Because as you know, in many of our social justice movements, the frame is runaway inequality. And it focuses on the economic destruction that is happening to workers and the opportunities to not only do business, but to own business. This runaway inequality hurts healthcare, education, housing, school, everything that you can think of. It is the war who is hurting us. And it is misguided statesmen, or I should say it is misguided politicians who have lost their statesmanship to represent our interests. This is huge, y'all. I'm going to end by telling you Citizen Action understands this is an intersectional moment. There's no issue that is not affected by war, and if we don't stop the money's being robbed out of our community to support a wrong warfare that is happening all over the place, and if we don't do something that is demonstrative like you're doing here in New York City, in the rest of our city, to push back on a wayward Congress and a psycho president who has been taking money and shifting it away from our needs. This is a great day. The sun is out. I'm happy to be here, and I'm just pleased. And we cannot lose the fire, and we cannot leave Councilman Rodriguez by himself. Right. You got 51. He's only one. Yeah. The other 50 need to come out of the dark, and you should not let them slide. Wherever you see them, you should demand that they stand up, stand with him, and support him. I'm with you. Peace be with us. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Joe Jameson from the Queens Peace Council. Joe?
Thank you. I was in the room when, with Mike Zweig and others, when the council member promised to have this press conference, and so he's a man who keeps his promises. So I thank you and commend you, Councilmember Rodriguez. This is very timely because over the last couple of years, the city has had its relatively full coffers. But now we're going into a darker time economically. A recession is on its way. And the occupant of the White House, who gave us a $716 billion military budget last year, is pledging a $750 billion military budget this year. And we live in a country where I have to go through 10 stations to get here. And I have to step over the homeless. We have a lot of lip service to the problem of homelessness in this city. And you have to step over the homeless to get anywhere, in Penn Station or anywhere else. So we've got to find the money, and the money's going to be more difficult to find in the coming days. So this issue moves front and center right now. So it's time to move the money, and I commend and thank Councilmember Rodriguez for putting this on the front burner, and it's up to us, the grassroots, to mobilize the other 50 members of this council to support his resolution. Thank you.
Money for human needs, not for war. Money for human needs, not for war. Money for human needs, not for war.
Next up is Sarah Manasra for Code Pink, New York City. Let's hear it for Sarah and her coming little one. Yes. Who will benefit from what we're doing.
Hi everyone. I'm Sarah from Code Pink, and I'm also an active member of the Muslim-Jewish Solidarity Committee and the New Sanctuary Coalition. And we believe in the end to United States wars and militarism. I'm not going to repeat what everyone else said because everyone made great points, but I'm actually going to talk about my own life. I'm 30 years old. When I was 13, our country invaded Afghanistan. When I was 15, we invaded Iraq. Those wars are still going on. That means over half of my life, we've been at unnecessary wars that have killed so many more people than 9/11, which was used as justification for those wars. And it's not acceptable. I think about, so I'm gonna have a child in probably less than a month. And I think about my child's future. And I think that our country is actually spending more money killing children in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Yemen, in Somalia, and separating children at the border and putting children in jail here than my child will receive in healthcare and education. When I go on maternity leave, this is the only quote-unquote developed country that doesn't have automatic paid family leave. New York State just passed a policy like a few months ago to guarantee 10 weeks. So why is there more money being spent to kill children than to give families support to have children here? It's disgusting. That's pretty much all I have to say. We have to remember that all of our institutions are invested in war, not only city government and national government, but our banks, our universities, our unions are invested in companies that profit from war. This is not acceptable. So along with moving the money and reducing the military budget, we need to work on divesting all of our institutions from war. And I hope
Babies, not bombs.
Babies, not bombs. So I hope that in my lifetime, we'll have people who have more resources for having children than killing children.
Right.
That's it. Thank you.
Babies, not bombs. Babies, not bombs. Babies, not bombs.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Next up, representing Judson Memorial Church, Real Peace Church, the heart of Manhattan, is Alan Hunter. Alan, please step forward.
All right, Judson. Thank you very much. One good thing about coming this far down. The camera. The cameras. One good thing about coming this far down and speaking is that pretty much a lot of what I've said has already been said. So I've cut out the middle of this thing and it'll be a little shorter, hopefully. Judson Memorial Church supports Resolution 747. It has long opposed militarism and supported domestic policies that sustain and enrich the lives of all who live here. Moving money from the military to meet needs at home would not only benefit New Yorkers and residents across the country, it would also be best for many people elsewhere. If funds used to bomb other countries went to affordable housing here, the U.S. might well destroy fewer homes abroad. If transportation, schools, and healthcare were all priorities here, it could mean the U.S. would destroy fewer schools, hospitals, and roads abroad. That's to say, moving the money here for people here would be good for people everywhere. urges the City Council to pass Resolution 747 to hold public hearings to join the hundreds of cities across this country to demand that the federal government move the money from killing to caring. Thank you.
Next up is Marcia Newfield, retired adjunct professor at CUNY and a PSC rank and file member. And by the way, I want to thank our rank and file PSCers here today.
Hello, I want to talk about responsibility because our elected officials need to be responsible. And as an example of that, I want to talk about CUNY. Now everybody here knows about CUNY or has been to CUNY or had a child or a friend go to CUNY. However, CUNY has been tragically underfunded so that the 23 colleges, many of their buildings are falling apart. Their adjuncts who teach 60-70% of the courses are grossly underpaid so they can get on food stamps. So I want to read to you something from 1849, which was the first declaration of the sanction of CUNY. It was called the Free Academy, and it said, the Free Academy is now going into operation, 1849. The experiment is to be tried whether the highest education can be given to the masses, whether the children of the people, the children of the whole people, can be educated, and whether an institution of learning of the highest grade can be successfully controlled by popular will, not by the privileged few, but by the privileged many. That was the beginning of CUNY, and yet our elected officials appointed to the Board of Trustees and the people in the state who have to vote on the budget are shortchanging CUNY. So that means they are shortchanging the children of the masses. They don't want us to be educated. They don't want our children to be educated. They don't want our teachers to be motivated. Make them responsible by moving the money. That's right.
Last but not least, definitely not least, Councilman Rodriguez talked about how many of us have been in this struggle for many years, and nobody can say that more than the Granny Peace Brigade. And I want to introduce Barbara Harris, who's fighting an aspect of this fight that is very important when we think about what's going to happen to the future of our young people. Barbara.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I'm following Sarah, who talked about having babies. I'm talking about our children in high schools. I see all these signs for decent public high schools not in this war. But I don't know how many of you know about the Junior ROTC program, the Reserve Officers Training Program in New York City high schools. There are 18 programs in the 5 boroughs. The council has an education budget levy of $1.6 million to pay for that program. The military subsidizes it as well. The teachers are all retired military who are not certified New York City teachers. I don't know how they get away with that. The curriculum is military design. So in social studies, we learn that we win all the wars we fight. We're only in the best wars with the best soldiers. So the students are indoctrinated, as we see at football games and baseball games and video games, in our high schools, and we are supporting them. And I know that this is on the table of the council members. They understand it, and we each can just speak out about that. We want to reallocate this money to something the students need. aren't enough guidance counselors. There aren't enough coaches. There aren't enough music programs. They've cut art. There are so many things that we can bring back, and 1.6 million can go to many schools who are underserved. So it's not a brain issue, it's an action issue that each one of us, if we have, I have grandchildren, we have children, we have great-grandchildren, that's whom we care about. And we care about, let's give them an education. That's what we care about, not a military education, not kids parading with rifles and marching in the street. Why are they permitted to have that in the street, even if they're not real ones? So thank you very much, and do your job.
Right.
We're going to wrap this up, but I want a very important message is that all of us, and I mean all of us, need to be contacting Speaker Johnson's office. We need to keep the pushing from below if we're going to get the kind of in-depth hearings that this resolution needs to establish the base. How much money do we need for subways? How much do we need for education? How much do we need for homeless veterans who are barely alive out on our streets freezing? There's a million needs in this city, and there's billions and billions and billions of dollars that the military is grabbing that we need right here down on our streets and in our communities. Call Speaker Johnson's office. Call each of your council people, write to them. We have just begun to fight. Councilman Rodriguez, thank you so much.
One thing I would like to remind everyone is that in the next few days, we will have the first hearing on budget. That's when the budget director will come. I think that's the day we're trying to figure out when is the day. I definitely we should mobilize. Because the timing is now. We want to engage, all the sectors, all labor, all community religion leaders to come and be part of this conversation. There's no another better time than now when the budget directors and all the committee, they will be holding the hearing. As part of the process before the handshake is the budget directors coming to the city and presented in that particular day. There's not a public section, but that's when they will be presenting the whole plan for budget for the city of New York. And I think that it is important also for us to remind all the members of the Congress that yes, the nation is getting ready trying to invade Venezuela. Yeah. And I think that it is important right now not to wait to hear the CNN or Fox News and for us to take Fifth Avenue or to come to Times Square. This is the moment that we need to call all members of the Congress. Say don't support any embargo in Venezuela. Yeah, and that's what they're doing when they build the case. Yeah. It's about putting all the news about how members of the media, they are not allowed to do the job. It's about infiltrating the military and putting some people from that sector to come out. Academics will come and say we're against it. We have seen these movies over and over and over. So I think that now it is a good time in only to call for the money to be reorganized so that we get the money, as you say, from the 59% on education, transportation, and others. But this time it is about a plan, a clear plan that this nation had to invade one of the countries in the region, which is Venezuela. So let's not just wait for that day for us to meet at Times Square on a peaceful movement. This is the time that we need to speak loud and clear. So I will find out when is the first day of the budget. I will share that information and see if that day we can push even larger number. Thank you.